He did use drugs. That's how I really know him too. He was a big heroin addict, and so was I. I got 6 years clean now. I work in treatment and everything, but back then I was using, and so that's how I know for a fact he was using. I've got high with him a couple times and used with him. And
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. While the mainstream media appear to be staking out the home of Brian's parents in Pennsylvania, you can actually see his father cleaning up after the SWAT team broke in there, and then also capturing Dee jogging, I think outside her parents' home. We won't be showing that. We will be continuing the sobering journey through Brian's psyche. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So May 2011 was 11 years ago when Brian was 17 years old, still a teenager, still at school. And he wrote on May 14, he wrote, "Thanks a lot, guys. This helped me a lot. I was not sure if it was normal to have depersonalization to my extent, but it is. I will not pursue happiness and do what makes me happy." I'm not quite sure what he means there. If he means, I will not pursue happiness and then I'll do what makes me happy, or if he means, I won't pursue happiness and I won't do what makes me happy. It's quite hard to know what he means. It almost seems like he means, I will not pursue happiness, I'll just do what makes me happy, which seems a bit of a contradiction. It seems he understands his condition here to mean that happiness isn't actually possible with his condition, so there is no point in trying. Imagine being in that place, within that psychological setting at 17. Then there's another post from the same day, May 14. He says, "If you're worried about the VS, that's visual snow, it'll get worse. And even if it does, it gets better. I say no, it makes it worse." I don't know about you, but that's, to me, a bit of a garbled, contradictory statement. It's hard to make sense out of what he's saying. Can you see how Brian comes across as an overly anxious teenager? And I mean, how many of us can say we weren't anxious as teenagers, but were we as anxious as this? And he's also someone who struggled to fit in. I mean, it's anxiety on top of the anxiety of trying to fit in and not fitting in. Don't you think the natural reaction of his parents, having a kid in that situation, may have been to try to take care of him, try to a sort of we're there for you thing going on, which may have led to them being quite protective, which may have made him theoretically closer to his parents than to others. I mean, if he doesn't have friends or girlfriends, who else is he going to get closer to than his parents? And couldn't that lead to him being cloistered? Cloistered literally means kept away from the outside world, sheltered. Now imagine if you are kept away from the outside world, sheltered, and you're struggling with depersonalization, you're struggling with reality. What is it going to be like when you head out into the outside world, you head out beyond your state, when you're no longer sheltered? You might think, yeah, well, he's 28 years old, how hard could that be? But we are dealing with a specific individual here, and the question is, how hard was it? So I don't think it was anyone's fault, this perhaps a certain amount of overprotective parenting, or someone who became quite cloistered in terms of his home life. I think it's just the way things turned out. Then we skip forward to 2 weeks from the previous post to May 28th, 2011. He writes, and this just gives an idea of what he was going through. He says, "My pupils were going crazy. I could barely look at light. I felt like a film over my vision, and it got sensitive to light. It's like the film made stuff fade out, but not completely. Ever happened to you guys? It also looked to be like a whitish shaded circle in my vision, outlining the light that I saw in my vision. This is still going on now, sort of." Now, I'm not sure whether this is anything like what Brian was going through, but I remember fairly recently, probably within the last couple of years, I had a sudden sort of episode of tinnitus, just out of nowhere, just a sudden ringing in my ears, and I was definitely quite unnerved by that. it's a sound in your head, and it doesn't go away, and you wonder, are you going crazy? And I mean, at that point, you're an adult, and you are, to some extent, surrounded by people that know what's going on, and it was nevertheless very, very unnerving. So you can imagine this, something that is disturbing your sensory perception, your vision, can feel like you're losing your mind. And how hard is it to grow up and to get a grip when you are struggling to actually see the world around you, right? And I don't want to be too harsh on Brian in a pedantic way, but for all the talk of Brian being super smart, on this forum, he can't actually spell sensitive or pursue. He spells sensitive with an A and pursue P-E-R-S-U-E. What do you make of that? And then we go to the next day, May 29th. He writes, "It sounds like you are on mind-altering medication. When I was on Topamax, I did crazy shit that I should have died from." And so if you go and look at Topamax, it's prescribed for bipolar disorder. It is which is also known as manic depression. It's also approved for the treatment of seizures or epilepsy. And then it is also used sometimes for the treatment of weight loss, or weight loss is certainly a side effect of it. So it's unclear whether Brian was using Topamax as part of a proper prescription, perhaps for seizures, migraines, or vertigo. In other words, symptoms of VS. And I actually suspect that is the reason he was using it. But it's possible he may also have been using it for weight loss. It may also be that is why he had such severe weight loss. So what is clear is Brian's adolescence appears to have been a surreal experience within a sort of chemical haze associated with virtual snow. Adolescence is a time for reaching out and stepping out into the world. And one somehow has a sense that Brian was instead retreating and regressing. And this whole idea that he would read books and that he was into books gives one an idea that wasn't that part of him being intimidated and afraid and anxious about the real world. And so if you are regressing and withdrawing at this crucial time during this period, you can imagine his social awkwardness that was already there would only worsen, along with feelings of isolation, particularly while his peers were progressing, developing their social networks and establishing traction in various dimensions in terms of their agency. And one thing you can kind of imagine is he's 17 years old. What was Kaylee like when she was 17? Well, she had a really good friend in Maddie, right? Did he have a really good friend like that? When he was 17, what was Xana like when she was 17? And Ethan as well. And you can just imagine that they were far more further along, far more functional, far happier, going through the stream of life, all smiles. It's a totally different life that he's having. He seems to have had a good childhood, but a really fraught adolescence. And yet, as bad as things seem to be going in his head, Brian seemed to be getting good grades regardless. That wasn't the case, for example, with Dharma. And so anyway, on May 30th, he seems quite upbeat. He says, "I'm pledging loyalty to this site. It has helped me amazingly." And then the same day, "You will be back to normal, something, something, something." And then he says, in June 6th, he says, "How come when I get a head rush, my VS gets silver and worse by a lot? We can talk to a specialist about this, I believe. I believe VS to be something to do with disturbance in the body that causes these weird blood issues." Anyway, so based on kind of a handful of posts, Brian seems to make some progress. He seems to feel better, only to suffer a huge setback. On June 10th, he posts the following: "I feel blank and so generic. I can barely remember my eventful childhood. As I try to think of my childhood, I become upset and into a depressed state. Damaged. It is like I have severe brain damage. I'm stuck in the depths of my mind where I have to constantly battle my demons. Am I here or am I fake? I feel myself slipping away. I hear screams faintly, but I constantly battle away from it. What if I let go? Where would I be? Would I ever come back to reality? I try to remember where I originated from, but I can't. I barely remember my childhood. I often fear being 80 years old, alone, and having faint memories of my parents, everything I missed out on. I think about my father, what a good man he is. How I treat him like dirt because I have this condition and I can't take it. I might spiral out of control and lose myself in the void. I can't let it all go. All of these regrets I predict for my future self. All of these thoughts of remorse. I got this when I was in my stage of discovery. Now I look in the mirror and I see this sickly, tired, useless and stupid man in the mirror. He's a complete disgrace. He doesn't even deserve to live. I remember when I was 15, I would wander alone at 2 a.m. Everything was so generic. Nowhere felt like home. I saw things that were not there, a different reality. I felt eerie and alone. I died during those nights. I felt like a criminal, but where was my record? I can't talk without flinching now. I used to be this healthy blonde-haired boy with blue eyes, and in a few years I have darker hair and darker eyes, half the body weight. Where did I leave off? I try to sleep, I try to clear my head, but the pressure won't go away. The pain and depression won't leave. Being me is this horrible disease that I was given. I think of this as I succumb to sleep, but I see a large intensity of black, yellow, white fuzz. It makes my mind fizzle, and I can barely keep in the bounds of reality. It is as if the ringing in my ears and the fuzz in my vision is simply all of the demons in my head mocking me. I fall asleep, but I wake up quickly to bloody screams. Is any of this here? Am I brain damaged? No. Then why am I like this? I have these thoughts all in my head. I search for someone to relate to me, but everyone looks down on me. No one can relate. As I try to read, suddenly my eyes look right through the words. When I look up, I see blue dots near the center of my vision. When I feel slightly calm, it gets hard to breathe, and I see bright dots in my vision. Nothing I do is enjoyable. I am blank. I have no opinion. I have no emotion. I have nothing. Can you relate? Now, I'm going to say something that's probably going to sound like a layman trying to be a doctor, but I do remember when I was at school that I actually had some of those symptoms as well, seeing dots, and it was passing. It was a fleeting thing. Also growing pains, that's also well known. Some of that is part of the natural process of growing up as your body is adjusting. So I don't know whether that was just a temporary phase and he was overreacting to it, and also because of other substances becoming quite paranoid about it. Can you relate? Did you go through any of that? I mean, I do remember periods of seeing dots and also hearing tinnitus thing, but more recently, not so much when I was a kid. But certainly whatever I experienced was a fraction, it seems, of what he was experiencing. And it seems he's having difficulty soothing himself, he's having difficulty controlling his anxiety. Look at the things he says. All of these regrets I predict for my future self. He even thinks of himself as a criminal who doesn't have a record yet. He says, I see this sickly, tired, useless and stupid man in the mirror. He's a complete disgrace. Well, at that stage, he was a drug addict. Nowhere felt like home. I saw things that weren't there. Didn't he feel like that in Idaho? This doesn't feel like home. I don't feel like I belong. And that is what he's looking for. This whole thing about, does anyone relate? Can you relate to me? I'm trying to look, I search for someone to relate to me, but everyone looks down on me. No one can relate. He's looking for a connection. He's looking to be part of a group of people, or be connected to someone or some people. So I'm not going to take it further than that, except to stress that Kaylee Gonzalez's sister, Olivia, she described Brian as true evil, right? She was interviewed by Brian Enton on News Nation, and she said something about, I think everyone should stop passing judgments on the survivor, but then she described Brian as true evil. Is Brian true evil? Leave your answer in the comments.
And how normal everything was, and the fact that we had no idea, she had no idea, I had no idea that true evil was genuinely watching them.
Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.